Welcome to our programme. I have to tell you straight up, we did a whole show and it didn't record. It was going to happen sometime, and I am totally, I take full responsibility for that, and it was really good. But just because we'd like to get something, I've got my guests here, we will do a section and just talk about things as we were doing, I guess.
So it's not just governments that make mistakes then, Paul, is it?
No, you see, you're glad we lost that. All that. I bet it was you behind it all. Oh, please, we have to introduce everyone again now.
Martyn Perkins, MHK for Garff. And enjoying the Côte d'Azur here out the window in Mr. Moulton's studio.
Yeah, we are really under a lot of lights here to battle that, so apologies on that as well. It probably looks like it's snowing almost out there.
Colin Kniveton, former civil servant and former colleague of Mr. Moulton at Manx Radio many years ago.
You were the general manager that they never quite got. You would have been brilliant actually at that. It didn't quite work. But
no,
you've been involved in civil service a long time.
Provided civil service, yes. And nowadays I'm a member of the Road Traffic Licensing Committee. And I'm also one of the founding directors of Grand Fondo, which was formerly Cycle Fest, the festival that takes place in Northern Ireland, which will be taking place again this year on the 4th and 5th of September.
And Mitch?
Mitch Sorbie from Just Pizza and Pasta, restaurant and pizza pasta restaurant in North Quay and Douglas that looks after the local people rather well, and they look after us as well.
And it's been an interesting time for you, to say the least. With, even as we speak, you had people cancelling on you, didn't you? When the
lockdown? Well, we had when the notification came through that was someone explained cases in Ireland. They said we lost one booking of 27 within about half an hour of the announcement from the government, which is a bit upsetting. But thankfully, we filled that place not too long after that.
And that's probably the biggest thing we're talking about on the programme that never recorded, was that. What's going on now, with this, it's over to you guys. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the government's now made the decision that we're going to come out of lockdown, and we won't be going back into it, and we will now be putting in a roadmap, if you like, of how we progress with opening the borders. And of course, it's always been very easy to lock down, but difficult to come out of it. But the roadmap will tick certain boxes, and will gradually progress.
Yeah, I mean, happy about that? Obviously, once Nobles gets a peak or any sort of situation where they can't handle, we're back in trouble, aren't we?
Well, hopefully we won't be in that position, Paul, by opening up the borders properly and people taking the right precautions, plenty of fresh air coming through public gatherings, people distancing, the cough in your shoulder, cough in your elbow and all that type of thing, taking the right precautions. I think we're in a pretty strong position. In particular, the fact that people, most vulnerable people have had the COVID jab, so we're much stronger than where we were before.
Colin, you're nodding away there?
Yeah, I think when the last general election took place, the last thing politicians thought they were going to have to deal with is something like COVID. So you've got to have a great deal of sympathy that this suddenly became such an issue, and the government then had to start responding. And I'm sure if you ran the whole scenario again, some decisions would have been made differently. But from an overall point of view, I think the government's done pretty well. But I do feel that now you can't keep on sort of locking down a complete community because of a few cases of a particular illness. And I think people now really do want to move on. And the danger is if you keep on trying to impose regulations when often you actually haven't really got the means of enforcing them anyway, that people they'll just get tired of it, and that they will gradually, and we've seen it with the second lockdown, far more cars about, a lot more difficult to tell that the regulations were enforced. And I think that's symptomatic of what will happen if you try to do it again. It will have less effect every time.
I think government's got to have a very, very clear message to the public. A wishy-washy message does my industry no good at all. We had a situation in February where we're at one of the briefings, for the First Minister said, well, we don't really want you to go out. Not that we're locking you down, but we really don't want you to go out. And that cost my little business £6,000 the Saturday night into the Sunday. And I think, going forward, we need to get on with it. We need to understand that COVID's not going to go away. It's here to stay. try and manage it as best we can, but the government has to encourage folk back out. They've got to turn around and say it's safe now.
But again, we talked before about this mixed messaging that Saturday. It must have been balmy, right?
Absolutely horrendous. And even as we caught up there, you know, we've got a couple of unexplained cases. Bang! All of a sudden, people panic. Oh, it's not right to be out to go out for something to eat. So no, we'll just cancel.
And you got your £250 instead of whatever.
Well, that would be better off giving it to charity. It was more of a slap in the face than anything else.
Yeah. I think the mixed messaging was due to the fact that, as we heard on the Social Affairs Committee, the VIRAs weren't actually in place, so they didn't have legislation they could take off the shelf and bring in place straight away. So,
I mean, I'm sorry, but why not?
Well,
Why
exactly.
They had all the time in the world to surely get that ready.
You would think that they would be ready for another one.
Well,
yeah, absolutely.
Didn't you think that? I mean, you know,
yeah, I would. And that's why we held them to account at the Social Affairs Committee. And it just wasn't. It just wasn't in place, you know. And you'd think you'd have it straight, and you'd draw to pull out and say, "There you go, we're in lockdown again." But
I mean, that was a bizarre day for many reasons. I mean, people really didn't know what was happening. I can recall that one of my sons was all set to kick off a football match, having been through the warm-up, all ready to go, and then the referee suddenly emerged and said, "No, we've been told it's off." So they all then sort of went back to the changing room, got changed. Instead of running around fresh air for the rest of the afternoon, all went off to the pub to watch the rugby. It was a bizarre situation.
With no social distancing issues there.
Well, there was nothing in force, was there?
Because it was in force.
Yeah.
It is balmy. Okay, I do need to talk while we do this condensed version about the OFT.
Yep.
You're involved in this. Obviously, you're in charge of the thing.
I'm chair of the OFT, yeah.
And we just sit back with amazement watching what's going on here. And you've been taking
the investigation of the buses you're referring to. Yeah. I can't say too much because there's an ongoing investigation into it. What I would say is that we've been hauled over the coals by the Environment Committee, and the situation is such that we are now, we've put out an invitation to tender for an independent body to look into it and make a decision on whether it was illegal government-sponsored competition or not.
And Colin, you have an input in on this one.
Yeah, because we have a decision to make regarding this issue of the routes that the bus van wishes to operate, because ultimately the RTLC has to approve any of these types of changes. But the problem at the moment that the RTLC faces, well, there was two issues. Firstly, we're waiting for the OFT to reach a decision because it seems fairly pointless for the RTLC to be arbitrating when the whole issue could then be turned upside down by the OFT's conclusions. And the other problem that we have is one of resources. The RTLC doesn't just look after taxis and public service vehicles. With effect from 1st of January 2020, it all became responsible for the new goods vehicle regulations that were introduced. And you may cast your mind back and remember the incident when a young cyclist was killed, I think it was 2005, when a lorry wheel detached itself from the vehicle due to maintenance issues and bounced along down the road, hit the cyclist who was tragically killed. After that, there was an immediate clamour for new regulations to be brought in to monitor the condition of goods vehicles. After many years of delay, they finally, as I say, came into being 1st of January 2020. And the RTLC were given another member of staff. So our administrative staff increased from 2 to 3 in order to look after this whole new raft of regulations and be responsible for their administration and maintenance of all ongoing issues. So we had a very good civil servant who was seconded to us on a fixed-term contract. We'd always assumed that contract would be renewed, but we were told recently that the contract was due to come to an end. I think it's the end of this month, and the guy is being withdrawn by DEFA and sent off to do something else. So we now are faced with a situation we can't seem to find anybody who is prepared to resolve the issue, because clearly now we were at full stretch with the existing staff that we had. dealing with the taxi issues and the public service vehicle issues. Then we took on what was a lot more goods vehicles than was originally estimated. I don't know why the estimate was so wide of the mark, but we ended up, I think, with an extra 200 vehicles over and above what people
Government
thought.
didn't know how many were here?
Apparently not. And the upshot was that it's been fully stretched. Now, when it comes to working on either an issue that relates to public safety or an issue that's an argument between the taxi drivers and Bus Vannon, the issue for the committee is, well, which has to have priority? And it's difficult not to make public safety your priority, and that's what we do. So at the moment, despite some politicians apparently sort of being quite, again, as with the OFT, critical of the RTLC that it's not making decisions in a timely manner, we can't get either Minister Boot or Minister Baker or Minister Cannon to actually say where are the resources or the people going to come from. And it is an ongoing issue with government that the more regulations and laws that you have, the more people that unfortunately you have to look after them.
I don't think there's any issue with the OFT and the RTLC. We understand your position, and until we finish our investigation, you're quite within your rights not to issue any more licences.
Investigation, this is going on forever. I mean,
it's taken a long time, Paul. But if you look at the work, I mean, a bit like Colin has said, the workload that the team is under. With Brexit, we had to approve the hand sanitizer. We had to sort out restaurants that were doing takeaways.
No.
Yeah, you can say no. Hand sanitizer. Yeah, we'd never done anything like that before.
Because only one person could.
The island had completely run out of hand sanitizer right at the beginning of COVID. The National Health Service didn't have any, schools had none, the police had none, there was just no, and we couldn't get any because there was such a run in the UK. And I think it's Finoddery Gin came up with we can do it. And so we got the government analyst involved, and I mean, who's going to do this in government? Oh, the OFT will sort that out. Yeah, but and we sorted it out.
This business with the buses and the taxis, let's face it, it's you've got an investigation going on and a demo area, trying the north, wasn't it?
Yep.
And then at the same time, you started another one going, even though you haven't had the conclusions from the first one. Am I right?
No, we haven't started another one going.
I thought it was two areas now in the island that they were doing.
No, one was the on-demand port service, which was the hospital getting to the airport one. But the on-demand service is totally different.
But they're going to conflict with taxi drivers, both of them, aren't they?
Well, they do to a certain degree. But the other one was DHSC deciding that they needed to cut costs in getting people to the airport because it was getting out of hand. And people
can see it both ways, obviously.
Oh yeah, absolutely,
£1 or something to get on a bus that comes and picks you up, especially compared with a lot more money if it's a taxi. But that's their livelihood, isn't it?
But it's an example of technology overtaking the rules and regulations. And years ago, you'd have to go with a bus on the bus service as it was. But now, of course, we've all got smartphones and all the rest of it. And indeed, some of the taxi companies are doing that. But I'm not going to comment any more while there's an ongoing investigation into it.
Could we get Uber here? I mean, could someone start
no
Uber,
reason why not.
Or do you have to be involved in that one as well?
Well, if you get some millionaire behind it, Paul, that can set it up, perhaps you wouldn't need to be a millionaire, but you could certainly do that.
But would that come under you? Because that would conflict with other people.
Come under the RTLC.
Yeah, come to you.
Yeah, I mean, there have been people looking at it, although as yet nobody's come up with anything like a proposal. But I mean, it's quite feasible. And again, the RTLC, like the OFT, has to look at the legislation and actually then determine, does the legislation permit this activity or not? And people may not like it, people may think it's anti-competitive or whatever, but that's not actually for the RTLC to decide. The RTLC just looks at the laws and says, is this a permissible activity or not? And a lot of time, I have to say, since I've been on the committee, has been taken up with issues relating to Bus Vannon.
Go on.
Well, just generally, there's a lot of changes that they brought in. I mean, the trial that's been ongoing. I mean, that had to be the trial itself had to be approved by the RTLC, but it was approved on the basis that it was a trial, and there was nothing in the regulations that would stop Bus Vannon doing what they're doing.
In the UK, a lot of private companies, private companies are actually doing that, bus on demand.
Well, in this shorter version, we did touch on water and sewerage and things like that, which I thought was quite quite important because Laxey's got, of all places, got a big problem with the sewage going straight out to sea.
Raw sewage going into the sea in Laxey and in Peel and in Baldrine. The island is passed the law that we will be adopting the 2006 water regulations, and that means that the other designated beaches will be tested once a week, and I think Laxey and Peel will now be tested once a month, but they will not be recommended beaches for bathing.
No. And your area is shoving it still in, isn't it? Because it's
well,
we're
still discharging raw sewage into the sea now. The Manx utilities,
it really is 21st century and everything like that. It's nuts.
You're not going bathing anytime soon?
Absolutely not. Don't want any wee floating things coming past me.
Well, the original plan, of course, was the Iris project, which is at Miriveg, and everybody was going to pump all their sewage to Miriveg and have it dealt with. But looking at it now, the green carbon footprint thing that we're trying to reduce our carbon footprint. We've got targets to do that. Is it the right way to go?
Is it ever really doable to pump stuff from all over the Isle of Man to Miriveg?
Well,
I don't know.
That's what they thought back in 1980, whatever it was, wasn't it? Yeah.
Well, the costs, you would think, would sooner or later become prohibitive, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Every
hill has to have a pump.
I can remember at the time there was a lot of scepticism that this would actually work as an engineering feat. But I'm not an engineer, I don't know. But there was a lot of queries going around at the time about the logic that was being sort of employed here. But people said it would work.
But the Whitehall vibration and the buying the cottages, all that stuff, yeah.
And also disruption on the prom. I mean, that leads into... Remember what the hoteliers had to put up with that?
Pile drivers going on.
And on. I mean, was it worth it, do you think, even for that? To put, there's a big pipe, isn't it, under the promenade to deal with that. And now they're digging everything else.
But people talk about the good old days, and Manx nostalgia is always full of pictures of people sort of the promenade sort of swarming with holiday makers in and out of the water. Same at all the other beaches around the island. And most people seem to survive. Perhaps there wasn't as much sewage in those days as there is today.
Well, of course, the population doubled when the holidays were on the go, weren't they? When Wakes Week was here, it was double the population.
But this week, I mean, they're saying they're not going to build so many houses now in the north, whatever, or east, whatever, because there's less likelihood that we're going to be having so many people coming in. So is that not a worry, the population declining or not going up in the right direction?
I think we've seen ups and downs of the population, Paul, and COVID has exacerbated the people leaving the island because they have kids in the UK or children in the UK or parents in the UK, and it also works the other way. There are people coming from the UK to the island, and I think it'll even itself out. I think the important thing is we've got to look after the economy, we've got to get it back on its feet, we've got to get the island a vibrant place and attract tourists here again and make it easy for them to come in.
Vibrant,
spending
money, going to restaurants. Are you seeing that? Are you happy with what's going
on? Well, we've got fairly substantial local base customers, so we get looked after. TT and the Manx and the Southern 100, it's the sort of cream at the top of the cake, but the cake is well and truly covered by local people.
But I think a Cafe Society on North Quay is what we're aiming for,
It's a wonderful place.
I was thinking you had the nightclubs and things like that, which it seems not really that large population do that anymore.
The whole industry's changed, Paul, and I knew to get out of nightclubs when the kids were communicating with each other via text rather than talking to each other in the bar. And you just think, what is the world coming to? I read somewhere that kids nowadays are lonelier than our grandparents were. Because you look at the average person, they'll go on Facebook and they'll have their 100, 200, 300 friends. And I bet you they don't know 2 or 3 of them if they bumped into the pub.
And it's all about how many likes they get for their birthday or that picture or the latest pout.
It really is.
Well,
I was
I was in Guernsey on a false news thing with Rob Collister on the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association. False news, social media is a big worry. It really is.
Is that one of those jollies?
You
hate all that. I know, but everyone hates it. Then they go on one.
But do you know what, Paul? By people saying that, politicians then won't travel, and you don't get the wide world input that you would get. And I've seen this in. We've lost the business. Apart from COVID, we've lost the Isle of Man politicians going out, spreading the word, networking, and pressing the flesh, which is what you want to do. Come to the Isle of Man, see what we're doing, join in the party. We're a great place. And what's happened is, because Facebook goes into gear, they're off on a jolly, this, that, and the rest of it.
Yeah, but you come on, many of them, being it's the
and I'll tell you something else, Paul.
They're in the very nice places, aren't they?
I'll give you an example as well. There's the Forum for Global Warming that the government's got, and we've got several people that are from the general public, and they don't want their names disclosed.
Right.
Yeah. Now, why do you think that is?
Well,
because they're going to get ostracised on Facebook.
But my point is, people see on Facebook politicians sitting in the Canaries or Caymans or somewhere like that going, we're working really hard. Now, come on, you know that happens.
Well, on the beach with a pina colada.
Yeah.
Well, all I can say is if you'd come to Guernsey with me, it was a long slog. It was 8 o'clock in the morning, right through to about 7:30 at night. Various input from all over the Commonwealth about what was happening. And we think it is a serious threat to the youngsters because they are so sucked into Facebook that they cannot see the wood for the trees.
And what about the other one, the one with the British Isles and all that? They always have their meetings, and we're a talking shop there, aren't we?
Well, a lot of that's now gone to Teams. I mean, and we still
So that's okay then to do that remotely now.
It's not as good as actually meeting people around a table like this. I mean, if we were doing this for Teams, you'd be sat there with your shorts on and a pina colada, wouldn't you?
Shorts on. And we wouldn't have technical problems either.
But you get where I'm coming from. There's nothing like, and I'm a gregarious guy, and I'm a sort of sales guy as well. But we need to do that as an island. And I have to say, some of the questions that are asked in Tynwald are giving away the crown jewels, because how much VAT have we made on the shipping registry and all this stuff? And the minister has to give the answer. Well, our competitors are saying, blimey, do you know how much the Isle of Man's doing? And it gives away clues, and we're talking about Malta earlier on, and it just lays ourselves open for our competitors to come snapping at our heels.
We're talking about jobs going in e-gaming. Your son got moved over.
Yeah, we were talking about population trends, weren't we, and personal sort of experiences. And I was saying that of my 3 sons, one is still working here on the island. One chose to go to London to develop his career there. And the third one was working on the Isle of Man in the e-gaming sector, and then his job was moved to Malta, and he had to go off to Malta with it, or lose his job basically.
And that's people going to your restaurant then?
Well, it's the gaming industry supports us quite nicely with their corporate events that they come down. But no, it's always alarming when you're losing jobs like that to other places, and as Martin was saying,
people don't want to work in your business overall, do they? I mean, that's always been a difficulty.
The restaurant trade is, or in bar trade as well, on the island is horrendous to try and get staff. It really is. It's I don't think they realise. You go onto the job centre and you look at that, and I think the other day there was 80 odd jobs for hospitality since it's opened up, and that's chefs, kitchen porters, waiting on staff.
Has that got better for chefs? Because I remember it used to be like
it's still horrendous.
You couldn't get them because you had to go through such hoops and hurdles.
Mm-hmm. There is still. There was one of the colleagues in the Restaurateurs Association was trying to get a chef from South Africa or something, and they've been battling to try and get this guy for 2 years through the red tape on the Isle of Man.
Really? Yeah. Is it the Isle of Man red tape, or is it the UK immigration?
Isle of Man red tape.
Right.
And one of the people from Department for Enterprise were there, and they said, right, look, we'll try and see if we can push things through. I haven't heard any more about it.
I thought the restrictions on work permits were being eased to bring those people we need. I thought they'd actually reduce it.
On scale, that was the whole idea, especially chefs, because chefs don't hang around waiting 3 or 4 weeks for a work permit. So I was told this is years ago that would all been done. And
it's still a major problem.
And what about the college? Are they supplying apprentice chefs or?
Well, I wanted to try something with the college to get apprentice chefs, and that hasn't really flown at all because of the very, very low numbers that are doing catering in the college. I think the year 3 students, I think there might only be about 18 or 20 of them. Yeah,
we had this some years ago with engineering, and it was the oily rag image. And if you can dispel that image and realise there's a career projection through that, and you can open up management opportunities if they do their apprenticeship, they progress up through the restaurant, and I think
so
that's
how do you get your people? Are they Eastern Europeans, and do you actually have to go somewhere particularly to find those people?
Well, most of our employees are European. Chefs, Italian, KPs and things like that are Bulgarian or the likes of that.
And that is the work ethic and the expectations are different.
Yeah. Reliability and work ethic. We have had a lot of local people come through our doors, but because we're probably one of the busiest restaurants on the island, they last maybe a week, 10 days.
Yeah.
And you'll get them. They'll come in in the morning and they won't come back in the afternoon. That's it. Off their way.
Because they want to be doing something on their phones and
they
socialising themselves.
I've often thought we should advertise a job to sit in your mobile phone all day and just see how many people you actually get applying for it. That's how ridiculous it is.
Yeah.
It's horrendous.
I mean, let's get it straight. The Isle of Man has got a lot of jobs going, and obviously a lot of them will be in restaurants and things like that, and you just, like other restaurants, can't get people to take it.
And don't we also have growing unemployment?
Yeah.
So it was 100, wasn't it? I think the other week. Yeah.
Went up by 100. So
you probably find those are people with the greatest respect either don't want to well, they don't want to work or they are unemployable. Yeah. And that's a key problem as well. I get a CV through from a chap, and I picked up the phone and phoned them. I said, "When are you available for an interview?" "Well, I'm just sitting looking out the window with a can of beer." And I went, "All right, okay. Well, I think you've just answered that question."
Yeah.
But he's done the bit to get whatever he has to do to get unemployment for another week, no doubt.
Correct.
Yeah.
You know, that box has now been ticked. I've sent out 3 or 4 CVs, so I'm all right. And that's so wrong.
Yeah. We're not the only ones suffering. I think Jersey and Guernsey have got the same problems, and I think the UK to a certain degree has got similar sort of problems.
Well, back to the population though. What's a good population for the Isle of Man? What do you think is sustainable, reliable, and we can cope with the hospitals and doctors and schools?
I think about 95,000, something like that.
Right.
That's my personal view, because I think we need more people in, definitely, but the right type of people, the economically active people. We were talking earlier on, weren't we, about people not coming back to the island. Well, I think there is a trend for people when they have children or when they're about to have children, they do actually come back to the island. They look at what's on offer in the UK, and having grown up on the island, they want their kids to have a similar sort of upbringing. So there is a sort of small niche family market that is coming back, and I think that's what we have to look at, really.
Because the crime rate's so low and...
Yeah, and those tend to be things that, whilst they have appeal to everybody, they tend to be more important to older people. Especially the low crime rates and things, and the security issues, and it is a concern, and it's difficult to put a sort of precise number on an overall population, because it's the makeup of the population that, as Martin alluded to, that's important here and in Jersey and Guernsey. And I think the problem there is actually more acute than it is here, that the population is ageing, and there are going to be less active people supporting more retired people.
And that's been a massive problem here, because our birth rate is declining and people aren't coming back overall, but old people are.
I think a lot of younger people have left the island and not returned again.
Yeah, and like we talked about his son going for work, I mean, that's got to go where he's got to go, right? But he'd rather be here if he could?
He would. I mean, he didn't, as I say, one of them voluntarily left, but one of the others, he didn't have a choice. So he either, if he wanted to keep his job, which he wanted to, he had to go. I mean, he may come back. I don't think he's going to be in Malta indefinitely. And if he does, I can't speak for him, but I'm fairly sure he'd want to come back here again.
The big question is, why did they move to Malta? What's the Isle of Man now done differently?
I think Malta's still in the EU, isn't it? That's the problem.
It's as simple as that, you think? It's just that one?
Yeah.
But was there not a lot of legislation? Because I had a buddy that was a consultant in the e-gaming industry, and there was a lot of legislation coming from the Isle of Man that was more, it was favourable in Malta. So a lot of the places moved to Malta for that, to regulate the jurisdiction. I think it was all down to regulation, wasn't it? That caused that problem in the first instance.
Yeah.
And talking about borders, we were talking about that, and the timescales. Do you feel relaxed about opening up the island on the schedule that the Isle of Man government's now come up with?
I think so, Paul. 29th of May is going to be family type opening up, isn't it? So that as long as you stay with your family for a week or 2 weeks, that's still got to be decided. And don't forget, it's target dates, and it could move in and out depending on what's happening. But it is certainly a roadmap, and it will happen. But it may be a week or so. If we can do it sooner, then fine, that will happen.
And this roadmap's better than the last roadmap, which I felt sorry for them, because we were going the wrong direction on numbers, and they were having been forced almost by the Chief Minister to come up with a roadmap which had no details of any amount in it.
I think this the latest one has had a lot of input from the backbenchers, from everybody, the top civil servants, the medical people, and I think we now have a fairly robust roadmap. Of course, you can never rule out if we suddenly get an influx of COVID cases, which hopefully, I don't, you can never say never, but I think we're on the right road. Government shows it's determined to do that, because otherwise it would have been thrown by the last 3 cases that were suddenly announced the other day when we were actually announcing the roadmap. But we are standing steadfast, and it's going to run its course. And I think by the end of June, we should be, in a much better place.
Colin?
Yes, I am booked to go away middle of 3rd week in May. I did that before the latest roadmap was released. I'm due back early June, so if when I get back the rules are more relaxed now and I have to self-isolate for a shorter period, fine, but I was going to go anyway.
Are you flying, Colin, or are you...
No, I'm taking the car.
Because that's the interesting thing, the support we've given to the airlines. And right in the beginning of COVID, I suggested that we should actually...
Well, here we go.
Yeah.
Start an airline.
Absolutely.
Throw some more money down the drain.
Well, how much money are we throwing down the drain at the moment, Paul? How much are we underwriting the air services to Heathrow?
You have seen Irini's books, have you? I mean,
I've
really?
I've seen Irini's
You really
books,
want to do that?
Well,
it sounds great on paper.
If you have a jet and all the rest of the razzmatazz, you got problems. But if we bought 2 Dash 8s, utilised the guys that run employed from Flybe, including their income tax, their national insurance, all the rest of it. We had pilots, we had cabin crew, we had maintenance staff. They were giving away Dash 8s at one point for lease. You could lease them quite easily. You had virtually no landing fees. Liverpool were giving you no landing fees. We had 2.6 million spent on the patient transfers. So 2.6 million you're going to spend anyway. To me, it was a no-brainer for about 10 or 11 grand. 10 or 11 million.
This is a government running an airline. I mean, which bit of that is not causing you to go, whoa?
You use the
or anybody else.
you use the steam packet model that we've got at
let's
distance.
not go to the steam packet.
Or you actually approach one of the airlines, which they've done already, Logan Air or whatever, and run it under their auspices. But you have the 3 legs of man on the tail, and you generate that... well-being of, we've arrived, we've actually got our own airline,
You remember Manx Airlines?
I do.
Right. I mean, you remember how much it cost to go to London? I love Terry Lilliard, but he had to run that thing commercially, and he did very successfully. Yeah. But you remember how much these things cost?
Exactly. I mean, it was over £300 to fly to London.
350. I did it once for a day trip or something.
Over £300, yeah. So,
but that was when it's £350 was £350.
And if you wanted to go to Liverpool, there was a thing called a fare cracker that was 19 quid. Yes. And you had to virtually turn up at the airport, so it wasn't guaranteed. But I'll tell you what, it filled the airlines up, the aircraft.
There are a number of positive points that Manx Airlines were very good at promoting. For instance, if you went to Liverpool for a hospital appointment and you got back earlier and there was space on the plane, you just got on it. They didn't say, we've got to pay an admin fee and we're going to charge you the difference between this fare and the other fare. So some things that they did were very good. But my wife worked for Manx Airlines for a number of years, and we bought shares when they floated, but no one made any money out of them. And if you look at the history of running airlines to the Isle of Man, my father actually wrote a book about it. They have come and gone with monotonous regularity, and none of them have actually ever succeeded. And I find it quite difficult to really understand how a government could run it successfly when so many people before have tried and failed.
Well, the government can do it if they're doing it like, even at arm's length with the steam packet. I mean, that goes on regardless, because at the end of the day, someone picks up their checkbook and writes out the deficit.
That's how I would counter Colin's argument. You need assurance that that airline is going to go on such and such a time. And Manx Airlines were absolutely spot on their routes. They left on time and arrived on time. They transferred tickets as they did. And if you look at Irini, Guernsey have taken a decision. It's worthwhile having that airline to get the business connections, to get people coming in. And if they weren't subsidising that, well, I don't know whether they are subsidising.
Well, they are.
Obviously, they are. Yeah. They are. If they weren't subsidising that, they would be subsidising business in other directions.
You're interfering with the free market, and that surely. That makes things all skewy, because other airlines haven't got that safety net, and they've got to run it as a commercial entity.
Well, that's why you need it at arm's length in the government, and that's why you need to have a look at your Open Skies plan. Because in fact, I mean, if you look at EasyJet, and I'm sure you travelled on EasyJet a lot. I've bumped into you a couple of times, I think, on EasyJet. But it leaves the island. We're tail end Charlies, and it leaves the island at 9 o'clock, and it's always delayed by the time you get there. It's not that cheap because you've got to have a hotel in London. So you pays your money and takes your choice. And yeah, Manx Airlines weren't cheap, but at least you could guarantee that you would travel at 8 o'clock in the morning and get there for a day's work or whatever. And the government could actually dictate the times.
Let's just remember, Manx Airlines ended because they were bought out, because they were a commercial operation. And then there's some made an offer, which I think was BA, because they wanted their London
slots. They wanted Heathrow slots, didn't they? Yeah.
And bizarrely, I had some shares in that one. I made money on that one. It's the only share I've ever made money on. But you must have.
Anyway, we're diversifying, aren't we?
But really, I mean, it's a serious thing there. It's back to taxis and buses almost, surely. Yep. The fact is, EasyJet do it because they know they can make some money on it. And it's because it's the end of the day, but overall, if you don't get that flight, they do put you up in a hotel or something happens. I don't know how it works because
how many times have you been delayed because of EasyJet has come back from Rimini or up through or whatever? I don't know exactly where they're, but somewhere. We're
you get there for £29 technically if you book it miles in advance.
Yeah.
But you would honestly see us paying a lot of money. And where would we fly to?
I looked at it quite closely, and if you have a 60% occupancy of the aircraft, you were looking at sort of 120 quid flights to Liverpool or Manchester, something in that order. That was the back of a fag packet.
But would you have the steam packet also owned by the government competing against you then? They'd both be looking for those bums on seats, basically.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, not everybody wants to fly.
I mean, at the moment, you can fly to Gatwick with EasyJet round about £100 return, provided you book it early enough in advance. Obviously, they have it changes every day, but the equivalent fare using the Manx Airlines model today would be about £500. If it was £350 in the late 80s, which is the period that we're talking about.
I must say that was a full whack when you had to go for a day trip or something ghastly. If you booked in advance, there was obviously much more deals. And Manx Airlines,
and you used to get a breakfast and all that.
I mean, it was a great product.
Yeah,
it was. And I remember seeing the flag, and you always go, yeah, that's great. But
chocolate with 3 legs of manna.
Yes.
Yeah. Those are days of.
Has it died a death? Your idea? What happened to it?
Well, Paul Quine is on side.
Oh, yes.
And of course, we talked to Terry Lydiard and various other people from old Manx Airlines, if you like. It's lost now because, of course, the DHSC went and did their own deal with the patient transfer. We're subsidising to more than 5 million quid. I think the question gave an answer of about 5 million quid. The other trips, the other routes. So I think it's a dead duck now. Had we done it right at the beginning, you'd have got virtually free landing slots. But now, of course, it's a different story.
Yeah, and then one day you're not, because once it all picks up, they'll. I mean,
you go into
Fly B was doing
Paul, and you book a 3-year deal. That's what we should have done. But again, a degree in hindsight is a wonderful thing, isn't it? Yeah.
And would you fly? I mean, would you go the cheapest, or would you pick an expensive one because it's got a Manx flag on it? I mean, I'm being a bit oversimplification there, but surely most people look for the best deals.
I think you would go for the best deal, but it is nice to see, because I live in Castletown, so it's lovely to drive past the museum and see the 2 planes with the Manx, and it really is. It would be lovely to see them back in the skies, with the 3 legs of man on them.
Right, well, we had a complete different second programme there, and it was quite good, actually. We didn't do that in the first one, but again, my apologies to my guests, really, for having a slight hiccup with my machinery here. I think the heat must have made it go balmy. Thank you for watching, and we'll have another programme, hopefully, subject to any restrictions, next week.